So when I was invited to be part of this show, I was super excited. Soon enough, that excitement turned into panic. I was excited because it was an opportunity to add your little grain of sand to like the forging of my identity, my own identity as a Hispanic male, as an immigrant, as a person of color. And you hear so much that this is what has to happen. And then I panicked because this is a huge responsibility. And as I was going through the struggles of freaking out and not being able to like deliver my story, and the rehearsals were not going very well, I started distracting myself with the idea of wondering, why would I put myself in this situation? Why do I seek the stage? And why do I look to speak publicly when there's so much distress and anxiety attached to it? And in trying to figure that question out, I started thinking, what is the origin of this anxiety? And I like the idea of beginnings. And it is hard to find the beginning of a story. Some people say it's hard to find the ending, but I think that the beginning is really hard because you can always dig deeper. You can always go farther back. So for all practical purposes, tonight's story starts in 1902 in the small town of Petersburg, Nebraska. This is where Sister Assumpta is born. Her birth name was Bertha. At the tender age of 19, Bertha decides that she's going to become a nun. And she joins the Benedictine congregation of the convent of St. Gertrude in Cottonwood, Idaho. Cottonwood, Idaho is really far away from Petersburg, Nebraska. And in 1922, when she was 19 and she joined, that was quite a journey. Definitely, she had enough time to change her mind. But she didn't. She was a woman of faith. She had no doubt in her heart. Not far, long after that event, in 1925, my father is born in the northern area of Colombia in South America, in a small village called Cerete. To be frank, it's just as hard for me to grasp the idea of growing up in Petersburg, Nebraska in the beginning of the 20th century as it is to fully understand and grasp what my father's experience is like growing in this tiny, weeny little village in the middle of somewhere in Colombia in South America. To me, this brings these two characters together. They both have a similar origin. They both come from the middle of nowhere. Let's see where the story ends. What compels Sister Assumpta to become a nun? She makes this decision at 19. And what compels my father to become a doctor and dedicate his life to science? He makes the same, more or less at the same age, they make the same decision. Sister Assumpta? I don't know. But I like to think that it has something to do with the landscape, the ruthless winters of the northern states, the endless rolling hills of Nebraska. Something about finding God in the perfect landscape. What compels my father to make his choice? I think that it has something to do with my grandfather. Grandpa was also a doctor, and my dad was a son out of wedlock. And my grandfather kind of turned his back on him, never really took care of him. And I think that dad was trying to prove to himself and to my grandfather that he was just as good or better, and that he deserved the attention and the care that was denied to him. In 1962, Sister Assumpta is assigned to teach in a small boys' school down in Bogota, Colombia, of all places. And she goes there to fulfill her assignment. More or less around that same time period, in the 58, my father has become the doctor that he wanted to become, and he's practicing in a small village in the outskirts of Bogota, where he went to school. And there he meets my mother. My mother comes from a very big family. She has 13 brothers and sisters. And all these people had children and their spouses. And this, that amounts to like 150 people, I don't know. I've never met any of them. The reason being is that mom is disowned because she marries the black guy. It didn't matter that he was a doctor. They get a scholarship. My dad gets a scholarship to come to the United States and complete his studies. And he's a neurologist, and he's invited to be part of a research team in NIH, the National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. And as he's arriving to Washington, D.C. with his family, Sister Assumpta is like heading down to Colombia. So they both going from these places of this nowhereness to other places in the world, and they're crossing paths, and missing each other. And when my dad and my mom are, figuring out all the logistics of going to Washington, D.C., and moving from Colombia to Washington, nowadays it's a big deal. Imagine in 1958. And one of the things that concerned them the most is that in that time period, in the USA, biracial marriage was illegal. So this was, a source of concern for my parents. But they decided to go for it anyway. Luckily, by the time they get to the United States with their two older children, my brother Luis and my brother Carlos had already been born. They traveled all together to the United States. And they find out that, thankfully, this is a civilized country, and they are discriminated equally. My mother is not considered white enough to present any legal problems, so they don't have to worry about that anymore. It's a good thing. That's the big difference in between the first world and the developing world. So when they come here, my father fulfills his studies while Sister Assumpta is down in Colombia teaching. She teaches music, and she starts a harmonica band in Colegio San Carlos that becomes some kind of an institution down there. And it's very popular amongst the kids, and the parents love it. And often they play the radio. They play on the radio, which is pretty cool. Father and mother finish their thing here in the United States. While they are here, they have two more kids. My brother Aníbal, who is born in Washington, D.C., and my sister Sonia, who is born in Galesburg, Illinois. Around 1963, they go back to Colombia. They go back shortly after Kennedy's assassination. My sister is born on November 24, 1962, and Kennedy is killed on November 22, I think, 1963. So they head back, and when they come back to Colombia, now 2 of their 4 children are fully bilingual, and they think, well, we might as well find a bilingual school so that we can nurture the language that these kids have learned. So they enrolled my older brothers, Luis, Carlos, and Aníbal, in Colegio San Carlos, of all places. Then I'm born in 1967 down in Colombia. And as I get older and I come of age to go to school, I too enroll in Colegio San Carlos. Sister Assumpta and I crossed paths in 1976. I'm 9 years old. And I'm very excited to be in her class because the harmonica band at this moment is an institution. The show has crossed over from the radio to television. They wear this incredible outfit that it's all I want to do is wear that thing and be on TV. And they wear gray pants, black shoes, a white turtleneck, and a red bow tie. Why would you wear a bow tie on top of a turtleneck? I have no idea. But this is always like a sign to me that I was the innocence of being 9 years old. I thought that was cool, and I wanted to wear it. So I was very excited to be in Sister Assumpta's class. And Sister Assumpta was even more excited for me to be in her class because my brothers were like these exemplary students. They were all A's. They spoke perfect English without an accent because they have lived here for so long. And also, she was very excited about a new act that she had been developing, and she thought that I would be perfect for it, and I was going to take that part. And they knew who my father was at the time. Now he was like a prominent doctor, and he was like a well-known teacher in the Faculty of Medicine, and my mom was regarded as this amazing woman that was probably responsible for everybody's success. So it always opened doors for me, being the youngest of the family, because these guys left a trail of stardom behind them. That's the family of superstars. And if you notice in the pictures, I'm usually a little bit distracted. I'm the one that is always either like putting on the sweater or looking away. And one of my favorite images from the family is one where me and my brothers are all sitting in the front yard of the house, and all my brothers are very focused and very well-behaved, looking at the camera, and I'm just looking behind me, and I messed up the picture, and I'm looking at some horse carriage that is happening behind me. And From that day on, my dad likes to put together picture shows, and she shows slides in the living room. And my nickname is like the distracted baby. You know? They refer to me as the distracted baby to this day. So the bar was set pretty high. And Sister Assumpta has a lot of expectations from me. Back in those days, there was this kid in my class, and his name was Felipe. And he was an incredible performer. He was a great singer, and he could dance, and he could do it all. And in every little school play or family event, he was always like the main attraction. While the rest of us were just kind of like messing up on stage and not knowing what we were doing and being so awful that we were cute, he was actually putting up a pretty good show. So Sister Assumpta gathers the band people in recess. We're going to have the first preliminary meeting for the show. And she announces the new students and the whole thing, the uniforms, all that stuff that we have to take to our parents. And she explains to Felipe very kindly. I thought she was very, very pedagogic at the moment. And she explains to him that like she understands that he's very talented, but that there's this new song that it's going to be for me. And that it has to be for me because of the color of my skin and because of the color of the skin of my father. And this was the first time that little target, you know, in the beginning, it's always very subtle. You know, they just put it on like a little pin. You don't know what it means. And it was put on me. And I was like, the color of my skin. Maybe I'm colorblind. I don't know. And so I'm faced with this cultural envelope where now I'm placed. But at the moment, it's okay. I think this probably means I'm better than everybody else because I'm getting all this attention. And quite frankly, I'm loving it. And I got the part, and I didn't even have to, you know, compete for it. And it's also announced that Felipe, the superstar kid, is now going to be my understudy. So this is great. I didn't know what an understudy was. I thought it was something like a butler, but it didn't pan out. So, and he's very graceful. He says, whatever I need to do for the show to come through. He was very professional. Everything was working out great. But there's this little lingering question about like this whole, what's race, what's color, what are we talking about? What's the deal with my dad's skin and mine? Questions are raised and never answered. So we get into rehearsals, and not only am I faced with this new cultural envelope and the whole thing, but I have to face my limitations, because it turns out that I cannot sing. There's nothing I can do about it. I can't stay in tune. I don't remember the words. The whole thing is a disaster. And what Sister Assumpta wanted me to do, she wanted me to do a song from an old movie that is called Song of the South. It's a Disney movie. And she wants me to play the part of Uncle Remus, who is this former slave who befriends the son of the master. The kid is upset because the parents are not getting along, and dad has left to Atlanta and left the mom and the kid in the grandmother's plantation. And Uncle Remus's job is to cheer the kid up, and he tells him stories about a rabbit that always outsmarts a fox that is trying to eat him. Anyway, the movie is regarded and criticized as racist and like ridiculous because it's an overjoyful representation of the relationship in between a slave and his master. And this is what Sister Assumpta wants me to do, I guess, in her limitations of cultural diversity. The closest thing to a black kid that she could get to play the part was me. Rehearsals go on, and this thing starts to be less and less fun. Sister Assumpta becomes more and more impatient. She's grumpy, she's in a bad mood. But she is a woman of faith, and she says, I am going to teach you how to sing this song. And so, to make things worse, every time that the understudy takes, they let him do it every now and then to see how he's doing. He glows. He's perfect. So she announces that, and I'm waiting for her to pull the plug on this thing. So now I'm not even making an effort because I'm figuring out the worse I do, the sooner they pull the plug. But it's not happening. And she picks it up. No, she's not stupid. And she gets us together and she says, we are going to rehearse until the day of the show. And only 20 minutes before curtain, I am going to make the decision of who's going to play the part. Is it going to be Felipe or is it going to be Bernardo? But I want you to do it because of the color of your skin. And I'm like, here it comes again. So day of the show arrives, And at this point, Sister sometimes our Rex is always screaming and scolding everybody. The whole thing's a lot of tension on that stage. And 20 minutes, we do the last run, and 20 minutes to curtain, and she pulls us out, and she's very disappointed, and she says, it's going to be Felipe. There's nothing that we can do. And we both have the same little outfit. We're wearing like overalls, we're barefoot, we have a white like long sleeve t-shirt, a little stray hat, and we have a corn pipe, but we only have one corn pipe. So I'm asked to relinquish the corn pipe to Felipe. And I feel a sense of relief. I'm like, whew, at least. I'm also a little upset about my incapabilities, but I'm happy to let this thing go, and I don't care. I go back into my harmonica outfit. I'm wearing the turtleneck and the bow, all is good. And since everybody's running because it's last minute, this thing is about to start, Sister Santa goes back, grabs a bag of makeup, and she pulls out like a big piece of cork and a candle, and she burns the coke, and then after the cork cools down, she proceeds to give Felipe a black face. And I didn't know what a black face was, but at that particular point, it hurt. It hurt my feelings. It broke my heart, because Felipe, he looked more like Pigpen in the Schultz cartoon, in Charlie Brown. He looked like something bad happened to him. He looked like he had fallen off a car. I don't know. It was like, what's this guy, a coal miner? What's going on here? And he didn't look anything like me, or like my beautiful father, my beloved father, or like my brothers and sisters who were like these superstars. No relationship whatsoever. And I felt at that moment, I realized that maybe this whole color thing was not a privileged thing. Maybe what they were trying to tell me, the message was different. And I was being a little bit too positive about these things. But it hurt. And the curtain opens, and I'm on stage, and I look at the audience, and it's a school play, so you can see everybody. It's not that dark. And I find my father. It's one thing about color skin is that, like, in that situation, it was very easy to find my father. He was like the only black dude in the whole theater. So I see him, and he looks nervous. He's very chill. I can see his neck is all stretched out, and he's looking at me, and he's like, without speaking or saying anything, he's asking me if I'm okay. And I say, I'm okay, but I can feel him going like, are we sure you're okay? And then I hold the harmonica in my mouth, and I give him like 2 thumbs up, and at that moment, I can see his neck come down, and he, like E.T., he relaxes a little bit. And we go through the show. And at the time, I was 9, so I'm not really aware of what's happening here. But, looking back and revisiting this memory, which I revisit often, and trying to answer those questions from the beginning of why do I seek these stages? Why do I do this to myself, of like putting myself in that position of like struggling in front of everybody? And I imagine, thinking about that, I realized that like at a certain time in my life when I was younger, like I liked the stage because it was an opportunity to be somebody else. As I got older, I started liking the stage because it was an opportunity to be myself. Nowadays, after my dad has passed, I think that I do this because I seek the comfort of finding my father in the audience. And I try to look for his ghost somewhere and see his stretched neck out, like, making sure that everything is okay. And thinking about the relevance of telling our own stories and like forging these narratives, that it's so important, I like to think that it is. And it is also important because at that one particular moment, when I revisit this memory, I realized that like everybody thought this was okay. Nobody thought there was anything weird with like a little guy singing, doing blackface in the school play in 1976, the centennial of the American independence. So it is important to pinpoint these little stories, even if they seem like, man, what's the big deal? I like Uncle Remus. People say, I think he's funny. I don't know what the problem with the characterization is. Or like maybe people feel the same about my story. It's like, well, he was okay. He had a buffer. His dad was taking care of him. Nothing really happened. But these little things grow exponentially. This target becomes bigger and bigger and bigger until like they can really get you, and then that's it. And when you have these places of origin, you think of the last time that it happened, and like when I had the story for today, I was thinking about a couple of weeks ago, I was with my son at the WHYY, very suspicious. And my son is very light-skinned. He's, for all intents and purposes, he's white. And a cop got suspicious, and he asked questioned my kid, he's 11, and say, like, what's up with this guy? Who's this guy? Why are you with this guy? Thankfully, the kid has been very, very well trained, and he said, it's okay, it's my dad. And then he was like, come on, Dad. But that hurt. That breaks your heart, and like the story is the same. Now this guy has more power than Sister Assumpta. And that was the second to last, when you feel the weight of that little cross that is bestowed upon you. And today, when we were rehearsing, I got a text from my ex-wife that said, you should carry your passport because the ICE police, the immigration dudes, are checking out Suburban Station. So once again, the same relationship. ICE police are pretty intense, but these things don't change. Later that night, as we drove back home, me and my dad, and he was quiet, and he had never said anything about this whole thing. I can feel him supervising, but like never really said anything. And as we were driving back, he said, you know what, kid? You don't have to say everything that you think, but you really have to think about everything that you say. And I thought he was scolding me, and I said, hey, I didn't say anything. And he stopped the car, and he looked like astonished, and pulled the car over, and he grabbed my face, which was very sweet. He always did that. And he said, I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about Sister Assumpta. So as we build these narratives, our own narratives, we must be careful to not tighten the screws too much, not nail these things to the ground too much, because what if we grow? What if we change? And we have to be prepared to surrender ourselves and who we are to become who we're supposed to.